It is the most enormous honour to be elected to this role, to lead the party that I love. Our first responsibility as His Majesty's loyal opposition is to hold this Labour government to account.
It's a fresh start for the Tories, but can Kemi Badenoch get through the door behind me and into 10 Downing Street? The Conservatives suffered a resounding loss in the last election, bringing an end to 14 years in government. Now, as they regroup following a long leadership election, all eyes will be on the new leader and whether she can bring about unity in opposition. She's already announced her shadow cabinet, and there are some eye-raising appointments. Robert Jenrick is the new Shadow Justice Secretary, despite the pair disagreeing over whether the United Kingdom should leave the European Convention on Human Rights. In a move to appease Tory moderates, Mel Stride is the Shadow Chancellor, and Priti Patel returns to the front benches as Shadow Foreign Secretary. Those appointments were made just in time for Prime Minister's questions. Tory voters picked her for her combative style. Here's how she fared for the first time against Keir Starmer at the dispatch box.
I would like to start by congratulating President-elect Trump on his impressive victory. The Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary met him in September. Did the Foreign Secretary take that opportunity to apologise for making derogatory and scatological references, including, and I quote, "Trump is not only a woman-hating, neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath, he is also a profound threat to the international order. And if he did not apologise, will the Prime Minister do so now on his behalf?"
So, who is Britain's first black Westminster Party leader? She was born in London but spent much of her childhood abroad, in Nigeria and then the United States, returning to the UK aged 16. She became an MP in 2017. Just 2 years later, she became a junior minister before taking her first full ministerial portfolio in 2022. That same year, she also ran for the party leadership, following the resignation of Boris Johnson. Known for not shying away from conflict, she has made headlines with her interventions on culture war issues, a so-called warrior against woke. Yet not all are so confident on her leadership credentials, being described by some colleagues as lazy and even been accused of bullying staff. Kemi Badenoch has made history as the first black woman to head up a UK national political party. But she herself has tried to play down the achievement, saying she hopes the colour of her skin is seen as no more remarkable than the colour of her hair. We went out on the streets of London to see whether her appointment as leader is making an impact among the public.
So she's just been elected leader of the Conservatives. She's the first black woman to run, to be head of a UK national political party.
Conservative.
For the Conservatives.
Oh, crumbs, that's wonderful. I wish her luck.
I just think they need to rethink from scratch. They've got the lowest vote they've had in decades, and I don't think she's got enough about her to do that.
I just think there's a long time and it's a long journey, and politics is a bumpy road, and if she manages to be leader of the Tory party at the next election, she's done incredibly well.
It's a huge achievement, right, to have a black woman finally leading a UK political party.
Absolutely brilliant, brilliant. On that level, yes, I think that's brilliant. In terms of what she's decided to do, be leader of the Conservative Party, then I'm not in favour.
There's always a conception that just because you're black, you need to follow on. No, it's if you could be black and your policies ain't right, I'm not going to follow you. So I'm still, it's the achievement, and I'm very proud that she's in. I just want to hear a bit more.
Does it make you any more likely to vote Conservative?
Well, now she's in, I suppose I'll see what line she's going in, because obviously she's going to be preaching whether on telly or in the street. So maybe when I see how she's going, she might possibly let me change my mind. My voting, because I just followed my parents. My parents, they come over here in the 50s and they always vote for Labour, but I was born here, they had us here, so I just follow what they do and voted for Labour. But maybe when I see what this lady's got to offer, it could change my mind about things.
Even before Kemi Badenoch was announced as leader, the Tories had crept ahead of Labour in some opinion polls. But Conservative MPs will know better than anyone how quickly support can fade. Our reporter, Tom Sullivan, takes a look back at how the Tories turned from the party of government into a party of chaos.
Following this result, I will step down as party leader. It is important that after 14 years in government, the Conservative Party rebuilds, but also that it takes up its crucial role in opposition, professionally and effectively.
Earlier this year, the world's oldest political party, Britain's Conservatives, suffered the worst defeat in its parliamentary history.
Sir Keir Starmer will become Prime Minister with a majority of around 170 seats.
Rishi Sunak immediately announced his resignation, bringing to an end one of the most turbulent periods of modern British political history.
A negotiation with the European Union will need to begin under a new Prime Minister.
The UK has seen 5 Conservative Prime Ministers come and go since 2016, starting with David Cameron in the aftermath of Britain's vote to leave the European Union. A series of political crises saw a succession of often rushed leadership races. Theresa May followed Cameron into number 10, but was again brought down by wrangling over Britain's relationship with Europe. Boris Johnson was next, with a renewed mandate to get Brexit done. He did just that, but a series of scandals lost him the confidence of his party.
It is clearly now the will of the Parliamentary Conservative Party that there should be a new leader of that party and therefore a new Prime Minister.
Liz Truss was bounced out of office in what she claims was a deep state coup, becoming the country's shortest-serving Prime Minister. She was swiftly replaced with Rishi Sunak. When he stood down after the election, the party decided it needed to make a considered decision. This time, the competition was not for someone to lead the government, but for the person who would be able to reverse that historic defeat and return the party to government. 6 candidates stepped forwards, and over the course of 4 months were whittled down to 2.
We keep creating more bureaucracy, more regulation, and yet the public services are not improving. And I think that's one of the things that we as a party got wrong. We, the Conservatives, followed this model. This is what I call the Blairite sort of third way model. And maybe it worked in 1997, but it does not work now.
In towns across our country, right now, like the ones that I grew up in Wolverhampton and the town I represent in Nottinghamshire, there are hotels which should be full of tourists, but instead are full of illegal migrants. And this is just the tip of the iceberg.
At the party's conference in October, it seemed there was one clear front runner. When we spoke to James Cleverly, he had a clear plan to get the Tories back into government.
The Conservative Party has the answers for the challenges they face, helping younger people get on the housing ladder, boosting the economy, making sure there's economic growth.
Despite being touted as a shoo-in for the final round, a bout of political trickery involving his supporters lending votes to the other candidate proved too clever by half and saw him dumped out of the race. With the most centrist candidate now out of the race, it was down to the 2 candidates from the right wing of the party, Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch, to battle it out for the votes of the membership. Kemi Badenoch has convinced Conservative Party members that she has what it takes to become Prime Minister.
The time has come to tell the truth, to stand up for our principles, to plan for our future, to reset our politics and our thinking.
The question is now, can she do that with the great British public?
It is time to get down to business.
To answer that question, I'm back in the studio with 3 esteemed guests. Mark Garnier, Conservative MP for Wyre Forest, Paul Scully, former Conservative MP and Minister, and sitting in the middle is the Mail on Sunday's editor-at-large, Charlotte Griffiths. Welcome to you. So the question, I'll put it to you, if I may, Mark, because the challenge that's been put down is that Kemi Badenoch has convinced party members that she can get into number 10 as Prime Minister. But can Kemi Badenoch convince the public? You didn't seem to think so, did you? Because you didn't back her.
Well, I didn't back anybody, Nick, because I'm a member of the party board, so I have plausible deniability on that particular point. But I think what is really interesting over the last 3 or 4 months is that without any leader at all, the Labour Party has now slipped to second in the opinion polls. So the Conservative Party, a leaderless Conservative Party, can do better than the Labour Party. I think Kemi Badenoch is onto something here. I think she'll do very well. And if Labour carry on this way, yeah, she certainly can bring us back in to number 10 in the next general election.
Paul, you were elected in 2015. You spent considerable time in Parliament. Has she got what it takes to convince the public?
I think what Kemi has got is a very different approach. She shoots from the hip. Now that can come to bite her, and I think she's had that in the past as well. She needs to grow into the role a little bit, but she can do it because she offers something different. What she now needs to do is make sure that the people around her that don't just appreciate the fact that Labour are shooting themselves in the foot. We've still got the Conservatives have got a massive renewal to do themselves before people start listening to them rather than other parties around. But she can do it.
Charlotte, Kemi seemed to have the momentum with her from day one with the members. She's quite an unknown sort of person to the public, though. What would you think the assessment is being made of her? Is it just because she's the first black leader of a major party in Westminster that will draw the attention, or will it be what she says?
I think it's what she says, and more importantly, how she says it, because Kemi does this thing that no other politicians do at the moment, which is she answers questions like a normal human being. She just answers questions correctly and truthfully. And if she makes gaffes, and I know she's made a few gaffes, she sort of owns up to them and says, OK, well, I shouldn't quite have said it that way. I think it's really, really refreshing.
Well, we just had a first PMQs. You two certainly will know that parliamentary prime minister's question times, it's a bit of a bear pit, and it can make or break careers in front of the parliamentary party. How did she do today, do you think, Mark?
I think she did very well. She came on, as Charlotte pointed out, she's kind of very feisty and she's very direct. She came along, she had a lot of grace and elegance at the beginning of it, and then she went straight for the jugular with David Lammy and his and all the comments he made about Donald Trump in days gone by. Actually, it's a perfectly reasonable question for her to ask. And I think Keir Starmer is going to find it quite tricky over the coming 5 years, being able to have to deal with that. At the end of the day, it's not about what the general public sees, it's about whether you're leading your own parliamentarians. And I think the Conservative Party, my colleagues in the Parliamentary Party, will be very pleased with this. And I think those new 411, 235, I think it is, brand new MPs will be very worried about what's coming their way.
She's done a good job for the party, for her backbenchers behind her, because the whole point about, and finally Keir Starmer said this a while ago, that actually it's odd because he's used to sitting in a court when you see your adversaries and people supporting you in front of you. When you are there doing that job, everyone that wants you to do well is behind you. You don't see smiling faces. So Kemi actually did a good job for her backbenchers. She's a little bit nervous, I thought, today as well, but that she can improve on that. It's a big role for her to do today.
She'll be fighting for airtime, won't she? Because leaders of the opposition, they do struggle a little bit. But does PMQs really cut through with anyone else bar these politicians?
Well, I have to say today's was a real comedy act, I think. She's got great comedy timing. Yeah. I agree with you that she was a bit nervous at times, but she kind of, she'll crack a joke every now and again. She's got great roars from behind her. I know what you mean, that, you know, the general public doesn't tune into PMQs, although I think everyone will watch this one. And God, she really made Keir Starmer look like a hectoring, nanny state headmaster, you know, because she sort of cracked a funny joke. It was very pointed. And he reacted in a very defensive, sort of finger-wagging sort of way. So it was embarrassing for him.
He doesn't really quite yet know how to deal with it.
Definitely
and maybe
not.
He's got to get used to being in government or trying to avoid answering questions, and she's got to get used to becoming the leader of the opposition. One interesting thing, though, is that the first question was all about the new President-elect Donald Trump. She brought him in, as you said, Mark. She had a pop at remarks the Foreign Secretary, the now Foreign Secretary, had once made about Donald Trump. But is the real takeout from President-elect Donald Trump's victory that if you focus on migration, if you focus on the economy, that is a route to power? Is that the route to power the Conservatives should follow?
I think populism is certainly on the ascendancy.
Is that populism there?
I think it is, yeah. Because look, Paul and I have both been ministers in government, and we know that being a minister is an incredibly difficult job. I mean, you've got to balance so many different interests. And for example, take immigration. So we could stop all immigrants coming to the country tomorrow. We could absolutely...
You can't stop illegal immigrants.
Well, forget the illegal immigrants for a minute. If we stop all these immigrants coming, we have no care system. We lose 500,000 nurses. We have a huge problem with this. So immigration is one of those things where you've got to get it right. You've got to convince people that actually some immigration is good, but too much immigration is bad. And when it comes to illegal immigration, that's a completely different thing.
But isn't that the point, Paul? I mean, look, you're no longer in the Parliamentary Conservative Party. But if they want to get back to power, this was a resounding signal from the American election, wasn't it? Immigration matters to voters and the economy does.
It does, but I think you've first of all got to look at why we lost and why Biden/Harris lost. Actually, we both American and UK administrations frankly weren't good enough. And I've said this many, many times, and that we were also the incumbents holding the COVID baby, holding we just put 400 billion pounds into the economy to keep it alive. We've then had Ukraine, we had the cost of living, all these kind of things. So you can't then expect the economy to be in a rosy thing. And the Americans had the same thing.
Well, Charlotte, let me just ask you, sitting in the middle there, these two sound like they're not embracing Donald Trump style immigration, deal with it front and foremost, as much as perhaps they should be given the election win. What do you think where do the British public on this, do you think?
Well, I think the British public also like this honesty. What Donald Trump does again, it's just even though he waffles and some of the stuff he says is frankly nonsense, he does speak like a normal person, not like a politician. And people are crying out for that. It's been 15 years of stupid politicians' answers to every single question. He cuts through that. I think Kemi cuts through that. So I think there's no point in complaining about it. This is clearly what people want. They want a normal human being speaking, admittedly not the truth, but with clarity and honesty.
And Kamala Harris is exactly the opposite. I think that's the difference, because we've been Constantine in the middle, whereas Trump is absolutely clear about speaking that authentic approach. Kamala Harris was a word salad.
Yeah,
frankly.
more
she
word
didn't really
salad.
say
They
anything.
can't bear it anymore.
And she couldn't describe what she stood for or anything.
Yeah.
Let's move on a little bit to what we do know that Kemi Badenoch said in her first interview at the weekend. I found this quite interesting because she said the Conservatives need to bring back voters who abandoned them, adding, "Our party is critical to the success of the country, but to be heard, we have to be honest." What does honest mean?
Well, I think first of all, it's honest about why we lost. I talked about the fact it's about just making sure we can refocus on people rather than ourselves as politicians. Not me anymore, but because we for the last few years we're talking about survival, forgetting actually we want to be elected for a reason, to carry on reforms with public services, to deliver great public services, deliver an economy. If you're just worrying about survival, you'll never win an election. But it is then being honest, as Charlotte said, about these big issues. And Mark was talking about immigration. You can sit there and just be really stark with immigration, economy, and those kind of things. But they all have ramifications elsewhere in budgets or public services. So you have to look at the whole and work out how you can speak
It's interesting
clearly.
you mentioned budget and public services. Mark, you've got you were a minister particularly involved with finances. Kemi Badenoch also said in that first interview she wouldn't accept the premise as it was put to her that to cut taxes you need to cut public spending. She didn't accept that. She pushed back. So which services would you cut? She said, no, I don't accept you have to do that. That's not honest, is it? You can't cut taxes and not cut public services.
Well, it comes back to this whole debate, which was going on with Rachel Reeves, who keeps talking about trying to stimulate growth, and indeed with Liz Truss. And in some respects, there's not much difference actually between Liz Truss's budget and Rachel Reeves' budget in terms of, you try to stimulate growth. At the end of the day, we come back to this great philosophical argument about the Laffer curve and kind of where you set your taxation level. Ultimately, what you want to do is to set your taxation level at the optimum level where you generate or you stimulate the most amount of productivity and growth in your economy.
You didn't achieve that as Conservatives.
Well, nobody knows where that magic point is, and this is a hypothetical, not an absolute. And also bear in mind our tax code is ferociously complex, unbelievably complex. It's one of the most complex tax codes in the world because it is more now about trying to generate behaviour than it is necessarily about trying to generate cash. We're certainly paying for all the things that are important to us, the military, the hospitals, all the rest of it. But if you start looking at the details of the tax code, it's trying to entrepreneurs relief and kind of the farm and stuff. And all
there's
that.
an office of tax simplification gathering mothballs somewhere in Treasury.
But it was too complicated to simplify.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I think you both very neatly dodged that question, but I'd like to talk a little bit about the dynamics within the party as it sits here today. We've had the new shadow cabinet. I think you'd probably confirm, Charlotte, that very few members of the public are going to know who these people are, but there is one, Robert Jenrick. He stood in the final two to win the leadership and failed. He stood on a platform linked to immigration. We're going to come out of the European Convention on Human Rights. She's put him in justice, which has responsibility for that policy, when she has made it clear she would only come out as a last resort. Is that a tension that can survive, do you think?
I think they've got a long time, haven't they, to work this out. They've just got to keep their powder dry for about 4 years. I'm sure they'll work it out in private. They both have the common aim of not letting the Tory party destroy itself again. So if they can, they can't meet in the middle of coming out of the ECHR, but I'm sure she'll be very, very aware of that fact, and they'll be having conversations behind closed doors to work through it.
Kemi made a very important point about exactly this thing during the hustings privately to members of Parliament. There's a grand strategy, which is to take control of immigration. Part of the tactics may or may not be coming out of the ECHR. And the point about this is we've got to, well, what Kemi has got to do is to set what that grand strategy is and what that vision is for the future. What we don't want to have is any of the minute details of how you get there. Because frankly, if we start putting in policies in place today, we're not going to be able to deliver
But doesn't
them for
that
5
leave you
years'
vulnerable, Paul, in the sense that if you not unreasonably go away and work out what you stand for, and then your principles are established and you evolve policies from those, that takes time. In the meantime, the Prime Minister can stand up and say, they're going to do this, they're going to cut this, they're going to do this, they're going to make your lives really difficult. You can't answer that.
Well, I think you can, because you can talk about values, principles, and you can talk about, as the Labour Party, frankly, quite did very successfully for the last few years. We're not writing a manifesto today. We're writing a manifesto in 4 years. We don't know what we're going to have. And so I think Kemi was absolutely right to say, it's values and principles first, because if she just comes in and said, look, I've got this fait accompli manifesto, you guys, as members and as parliamentary party, have to just fall behind it or go away, then that's just never going to work. So what Robert was actually proposing with automatically leaving the ECHR without any further discussion and getting everybody, including Mark, to sign up to this ahead of the next election, he was just putting off a fight that they would inevitably have just in the lead up when candidates would say, I can't. The candidates would say, I can't sign up to that, some people, and there would be an almighty bun fight. To actually work through the process as Kemi's trying to do,
so
I think
here
is the right thing.
You have the prospect then of building a coalition, if you like, within your own party. Maybe she will get unity, no mean achievement in the present day Conservative Parliamentary Party. But how do you build a coalition of voters, Mark, that are going to win from the blue wall in the south, bring back those who voted Liberal Democrats and the coalition partners of Boris Johnson up in the north?
Well, so one of the big problems that's facing both Labour and the Conservatives is two-party politics is now the lowest it's been ever since we had two main parties. In 1958, it was 98% of the population voted for one or the other of the main parties. This time round, I think it was 52, 53%. So we've got some really interesting dynamics going on. And bear in mind that first-time voters weren't voting Labour like they normally do. They were voting Reform or Green. Labour and Conservatives are coming sort of third and fourth. So we've got very different dynamics going on. And this is where it comes back to populism. It's very easy to come up with populist solutions to problems. It's very difficult to govern. Now, we've got to wait and see what happens in 5 years' time. There are huge numbers of people who are coming down. And I bumped into some farmers in Tesco's the day before yesterday who were unbelievably upset about what the Labour government is doing to inheritance tax on farms. And I asked them, who did you vote for? And they said, well, we certainly didn't vote for Labour. But who did you vote for? They voted Reform. Well, they've got what they were warned about. If you've got to vote for one or the other parties who know how to run the country. Otherwise, you end up with random results.
But there's a Nigel problem, isn't there?
Well, I was going to say, look, you don't lurch politically, and lurch is never a good word in politics in general, so don't lurch just on a policy platform. But a lot of people voted Reform from the right because they were disaffected with the Conservative Party. I keep coming back to the fact we weren't good enough. And on the left, the Lib Dems and the Green Party are the repository of votes when it's pox on all your houses, we don't want to vote for either of the big parties, they go Lib Dem or Green. There are some, obviously, immigration and other policy platforms that are important to people, but on the whole, it's about competence, it's about showing that you're actually interested in the wider electorate's interest, not your own.
Charlotte, last word to you, because we're running out on time on this. Do you think that Kemi Badenoch, while she may not say she's chasing reform and going to do deals with reform, do you think she is the right answer to the problem of Nigel Farage, leader of Reform, facing the Conservatives now?
I do. I think she will get the Conservative Party to a point where Nigel will throw his hands in the air and go, actually, to be honest, I'll vote for you, because I do think she'll bring those people in, and you know, she's showing all the signs of it so far, actually. And Nigel said she's just more of the same, and she laughed that off because it was so obviously not true. She's so obviously not more of the same, and she's showing every signs of winning over the right of the party, I think.
Well, Charlotte Griffiths, Paul Scully and Mark Garnier, thanks very much indeed for joining us here on Westminster Watch. Thanks again to all my guests for joining me. And don't forget to subscribe to the TRT World YouTube channel for more lively debate and conversation. But for now, from me and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.